Module 6, Compare and Contrast. Top Hat Comparison Organizer. Good morning, boys and girls. Let's say a class of 20, 25, 30 students. Good morning, folks. Say a group of 3+ people. Today we're going to compare and contrast, along with finding similarities, with World War I and World War II. Probably the most terrible conflicts this world has ever seen. An in-class Top Hat Comparison Organizer assignment, here's one behind me on the whiteboard, will occur in class with all of you today, where you all perform research on these two great conflicts, World War I and World War II. As you can see, my Top Hat Comparison Organizer example is behind me on the whiteboard behind me. However, before we get into details, let's talk about World War I and some examples. The timeline from World War I was 1914 to 1918. Germany, Austria-Hungary, Turkey, and Bulgaria were known as the Central Powers, or the bad countries. The Allied powers, or the good countries, consisted of the United States, France, Great Britain, Russia, Italy, and Japan. The United States economy was in a recession before World War I, but went into a prosperity period after World War I was over. The European economies were stable before World War I, but they had problems after the war. They went into a depression after World War I. The Allied powers won the war due to having more resources and eventually winning more of the battles and overwhelming the Central Powers. Today you will be drawing on notebook paper, your own Top Hat Comparison Organizer, like the one you see behind me on the whiteboard, a diagram, and filling it out, just like the one you see behind me, with comparing, contrasting, and similar ideas on these two world wars. Not present on my organizer behind me right now is a hint for all of you to take in when you do your research. The majority of World War I was fought in mainland Europe, with mostly land battles. So keep that in the back of your heads, folks. Let's talk about World War II. Timeline was 1939 to 1945. The Axis group, or bad countries, consisted of Germany, Japan, and Italy. The Axis group, or good countries, consisted of the United States, Great Britain, France, the Soviet Union, and China. The United States economy was in a horrible Great Depression. We've all heard of the Great Depression before World War II, but went into a prosperity period after World War II was over. However, the European economies were not in so much of a horrible depression before World War II, but eventually went into a depression because of the United States. It carried over to the rest of the world. However, unlike the United States, after World War II was over, a lot of the European economies, other world economies, stayed in the depression. European economies stayed in the depression mostly because Europe was devastated as a result of World War II. The Allies group won World War II, once again, due to having more resources, and like World War I, also not on this organizer, and a hint for you to take, the Allies group eventually won more air, sea, and land battles, overwhelming the Axis group of countries, with this war being fought almost all over the world, not just mainland Europe. So I think you could see the differences, similarities, how I'm comparing and I'm contrasting these wars. Please take it into account. So there are definitely some contrasting, comparing, and similar ideas on these two wars. Other facts you will find on the internet between these two world wars, unfortunately, was how many people were killed, how much money was spent to fight these wars, how many different countries were involved, how much materials were used to fight these wars, and what kinds. There's similarities, there are differences. Rifles were made differently in World War I and used differently from World War I to World War II. Ships were made and operated differently from World War I to World War II. Hand grenades, bombs, everything was made differently in World War I compared to World War II, and they were used differently in both wars. You should all think of questions you have on these wars first, then search the internet on your in-class laptops to these questions to help you find answers. Not to forget, you could also see some similarities here at the bottom of my organizer. The United States, Great Britain, and France were allies in both world wars. Germany was an adversary or an enemy to the Allies in both world wars. Germany lost both world wars, suffering humiliating defeats and forced to pay reparations. In other words, they had to pay back the good countries. in these wars. So Germany suffered a lot. In a sense, they deserved it, though. They started the wars pretty much. As you can see, once again, on the board, the whiteboard behind me is a top hat comparison organizer. It's designed to help you perform today's in-class assignment. Let me just bring you a little closer here, just to see up close the top hat organizer. We are comparing World War I to World War II, and we have some similarities. So there's comparisons, contrasts, and similarities. Let's put you back here. To continue. Just a few more examples to get you all comfortable. Comparing and contrasting these two world wars would be like doing the same between cats and dogs. Winter and spring. Apples and oranges. Does everyone follow what I'm doing here, where I'm coming across? Good. Today, once again, though, we will do so for World War I and World War II. Why are we conducting a comparison for these two great conflicts? One answer would be how these great conflicts in world history were fought between many different countries. And in how World War I, groups of countries were pitted against other groups. But in World War II, these groups of countries changed members. Another example would be these groups of countries changed their names, like the Allied powers to the Allies, the Central Powers to the Axis group or powers. These are just some quick examples. As I move through this organizer behind me, you will be able to see more to make sense, to provide some criteria towards these two world wars on this organizer. Does it appear that mostly the same countries are involved in both wars? Does it appear that mostly the same countries are pitted against each other in these great world wars? Does it appear that the victors and losers were the same in both of these world wars? Once again, boys and girls, folks, these are just some examples up here, but you will be able to use your in-class laptops to search the internet for many other examples that could provide you with information to perform your own comparisons, contrasts, and similarities on these two great world wars. You could then take the criteria example questions I provided, use them as examples to describe each one of your items you come up with on your own top hat comparison organizer. As you can see what I did up here on my organizer, I have a good example facts of World War I on the left side, and on the right side I have a good combination of contrasting, comparing examples of World War II on the right side. Nice and simple, folks. And again, I don't want to forget, then at the bottom down here, we have similarities between both world wars. Once again, nice and simple. Boys and girls, folks, these are just so many different contrasting comparisons and similar facts on both World War I and World War II. With the power of the internet, you'll be able to search for many more examples for these two great conflicts in world history. And as a result, you'll be able to produce your own top hat comparison organizer, which you will take your own notebook paper, a pen, and a pencil. You will draw this organizer chart, same as you can see behind me on the whiteboard. You will model what I have behind me on your notebook paper, and you will fill it in with a plethora of contrasting, comparing, and similar amounts of information for these two great conflicts in World War I and World War II. Does everyone follow me so far? Good. As we look one more time at this organizer behind me with the information provided, do both wars seem alike or very different? Can anyone recognize a significant difference between these wars? Can anyone recognize a significant similarity? What conclusions can we come up with by looking at these details, or better yet, what is our overall feel and opinion, or opinions, about these wars? Who seemed to start these conflicts? Who consisted of the bad countries? Who consisted of the good countries? As you take in this class assignment from here, this in-class assignment, which it is for today, from here, all these types of questions to yourselves, as you produce your organizer, please try to describe your contrasting, comparing, and similar ideas or facts you find off the internet of these wars before you write them down on your top hat comparison organizer. This will help you present your facts with understanding for anyone who reads your organizer, including myself. So boys and girls, folks, you now have a good idea on how to draw your top hat comparison organizer. As you could see once behind me, the organizer that I drew, that I put together. You will model yours from mine. The top hat, you will then take this assignment, your in-class assignment today, which will consist of having you search the internet to come up with contrasting, comparing and similar ideas for these two world wars in World War I and World War II. These two great conflicts in world history have numerous sites filled with facts, ideas, and details on the internet. You're all aware of that. You all know how to use Google as a search engine, and you should have a good idea on what words to type in to help you with this assignment. This assignment will count as an in-class work assignment. You will have 10 minutes to complete this assignment today, in which I will then collect from you. So at this time, please obtain your in-class laptops from the laptop cabinet at this time. It is now 9 a.m. I will give you 5 minutes to boot up your laptops and get your materials ready. And then you will have from 9:05 to 9:15 to come up with some good ideas for your top hat comparison organizer. So please retrieve your laptops and begin this assignment. Any questions? Please raise your hands at this time. If there's no questions at this time, I will be roaming the room to monitor and assist. Are there any questions at this time? If not, please begin. Thank you.